I discovered that my husband was going on a cruise with his lover, but when he arrived, I was already there with her fiancé. The message appeared on my screen at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. An email confirmation forwarded from Paradise Cruise Lines, not sent to me, but accidentally shared to our family cloud account. A luxury suite, champagne package, couples massage, all booked under my husband's name for the following week during his important business conference in Seattle. Except there was another name on the reservation, Vanessa. My hands didn't tremble. My coffee didn't spill. Something crystallized inside me. 15 years of marriage suddenly framed with perfect and terrible clarity. I scrolled through the itinerary with strange detachment. 5-day Caribbean cruise, ocean view balcony suite, captain's table dinner, all the romantic cliches you'd expect from a man who couldn't even remember what flowers I preferred on our anniversary. "Working late again tonight," he had texted me an hour earlier. "Don't wait up." I studied the cruise details, noting the suite cabin number 1243, deck 10, starboard side. Something about seeing those specific details made it real. This wasn't just an affair. This was planning, calculation, a parallel life being built while I maintained ours. What a fool I had been. I remember standing up and walking to our bedroom closet, the one we shared. His suits hung next to my dresses, as if they belonged there. His shoes lined up with mine. The physical proximity of our things suddenly seemed obscene. I was about to start pulling his clothes down, to tear the fabric and destroy the memories, when my phone chimed again. Another notification from the family cloud. A photo appeared. A woman, young, blonde, perfect teeth, posing in front of a mirror wearing lingerie that still had price tags hanging from it. The caption read, "Can't wait for you to take this off on our trip." Counting the days. I recognized her. Vanessa, the new customer service director at my husband's company, the one he had insisted on inviting to our Christmas party last December, the one who had looked at me with something like pity while accepting a glass of wine in my home. What stopped me from destroying his things wasn't restraint. It was a random memory. A conversation I'd overheard at a charity gala 3 months ago. Vanessa discussing loudly her engagement to some tech entrepreneur, showing off a flashy diamond ring, talking about her upcoming June wedding. I sat on the edge of our bed, phone still in hand, and did something I'd never done before. I searched her name on social media. Her profile was public, filled with hashtags about being blessed and future wife. And there he was, her fiancé, tagged in dozens of photos. Bradley, handsome in his polished Silicon Valley way. His own profile full of startup success stories and motivational quotes. One recent post caught my attention. "Heading on a solo trip before the wedding madness. Time to clear my head and come back ready to start forever with a Vanessa." The cruise dates matched exactly. A strange calm came over me, the kind that arrives when the universe delivers something so perfectly synchronized it feels like destiny. I opened my laptop and navigated to Paradise Cruise Line's deck plans. Cabin availability. My credit card was already in my hand. 20 minutes later, I had my own confirmation email. Single cabin 1245, right next to their love nest. The symmetry was too perfect to ignore. I took a deep breath and did the only rational thing a woman in my position could do. I found Bradley's business email through his company website and sent him a message. "Mr. Bradley, I believe we have something important to discuss regarding our respective partners and their upcoming Caribbean cruise. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow? It concerns your fiancée Vanessa and my husband, who have made plans I think you should know about." I attached the booking confirmation. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply waited, watching the little dots that indicated he was reading my message. Typing, stopping, typing again. His response came 3 minutes later. Where and when? The next morning, I sat at a corner table in an upscale downtown cafe watching the door. I recognized him immediately. Taller in person, with that confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. His eyes found mine across the space. Recognition, understanding, the look of someone whose world was also shattering. He sat across from me. No handshake, no introduction needed. "Show me everything," he said quietly. And I did. By the time our coffees had gone cold, we had formed an alliance born of shared betrayal. Not just an alliance, a pact, a strategy. "They think they're so clever," I said, finally allowing myself a bitter smile. "They have no idea what's coming." Bradley's expression hardened with resolve. "What exactly did you have in mind?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I already booked the cabin next to theirs, but one person watching their romantic getaway crumble isn't as satisfying as two, don't you think?" He matched my lean, his voice equally low. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" I'm suggesting we both take that cruise. I'm suggesting we become very, very good friends who just happen to be everywhere they are. I'm suggesting we make this the vacation they'll never forget, for all the wrong reasons. For the first time since we'd sat down, Bradley smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone imagining sweet, calculated retribution. I'm in, he said, but we need to be smarter than them. We need a plan that doesn't just catch them, but destroys whatever fantasy they've built. I nodded, feeling something like excitement beneath my anger. By the time we dock back in Miami, they'll wish they never set foot on that ship. The week before the cruise passed in an Academy Award-worthy performance. I kissed my husband goodbye as he packed his conference clothes. I helped him choose a tie for his presentation. I even drove him to the airport, waving from the departure lane with a smile plastered on my face. "I'll miss you," he said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "Oh, I'm sure the time will fly," I replied, thinking of the swimsuits and evening dresses already packed in my own suitcase, hidden in Bradley's temporary apartment. As soon as his plane took off, not to Seattle but to Miami, I drove straight to the port where Bradley was waiting. We had spent every day of the past week planning, coordinating, building a backstory that would make us seem like old college friends reuniting by chance, practicing our reactions for when we accidentally ran into our cheating partners, memorizing the ship's layout. We booked identical shore excursions to the ones they had scheduled. "How are you feeling?" Bradley asked as we checked in at the cruise terminal, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. "I keep alternating between wanting to cry and wanting to push them both overboard," I admitted. He nodded. "I've already looked up maritime law. Unfortunately, that would be frowned upon." That unexpected flash of dark humor made me laugh for the first time in days. It felt strange in my throat. We boarded separately, agreeing to meet later after settling into our cabins. I found mine easily, 12:45, right next to where my husband would soon be caressing his lover. I pressed my ear to the adjoining wall. Empty for now. Their flight wouldn't arrive for a few hours. I unpacked methodically, hanging dresses I had bought specifically for this cruise, dresses my husband had never seen, dresses chosen to make a statement when the inevitable confrontation came. At 6 p.m., Bradley texted, "They've boarded. Just saw them at check-in. They didn't see me." My heart raced. My palms grew damp. The moment was approaching faster than I had anticipated. I met Bradley at a bar 3 decks up, far enough away that we wouldn't immediately run into them. He already had a martini waiting for me. "To the most twisted vacation either of us has ever taken," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his. "May we survive with our dignity, if not our marriages." My marriage ended before it began, apparently. His voice had the same hollow quality I'd felt in my chest for days. We shared our stories then, filling in the blanks of our relationships. Bradley had met Vanessa at a tech conference 2 years ago. They had gotten engaged quickly. Too quickly, he realized now. There had been signs of her infidelity, unexplained absences, secretive phone behavior, sudden work emergencies. I ignored it all, he said, staring at his drink. I wanted so badly to believe I'd found the right person. 15 years, I replied. 15 years I gave him. We talked about children. We decided together to focus on our careers first. We had a timeline. Next year was supposed to be our year to try. My voice broke unexpectedly. Bradley's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Be angry. I am." We spent hours talking, drinking enough to stay relaxed but not enough to cloud our judgment. We needed to be sharp, ready. Around 10 p.m., we ventured to the main dining room for the welcome dinner, and there they were, sitting at a table for 2 near the windows. My husband's hand rested on the small of Vanessa's back as they studied the menu. Intimate, comfortable, practiced. The sight hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't their first trip together. This wasn't new. The realization made my knees buckle slightly. Bradley steadied me with a hand on my elbow. "Not yet," he whispered. "Let them think they got away with it. Tomorrow we begin." We retreated to a different restaurant, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was a knot of acid and anger. "How long do you think this has been going on?" I asked, pushing pasta around my plate. "Does it matter? A day? A month? A year? They both betrayed us." "It matters to me," I insisted. "I need to know how much of my life has been a lie." Back in my cabin that night, I pressed my ear to the wall again. I could hear them laughing, murmuring, the occasional creak of bed springs. I recorded it all, evidence for what was to come. I barely slept. When morning came, I met Bradley for breakfast on the Lido deck. We had determined that our cheating partners had booked a snorkeling excursion at our first port of call, a small private island owned by the cruise line. Ready for day one? Bradley asked, sliding a coffee toward me. As ready as I'll ever be. We took the tender to the island 30 minutes after my husband and Vanessa had left. We spotted them easily on the beach, sharing a lounge chair, her head on his chest, his fingers running through her hair. Bradley and I set up our own chairs exactly in their line of sight, but angled so they wouldn't notice us immediately. We waited for the perfect moment, the recognition, the shock. It came when my husband stood up to get drinks from the beach bar. He turned, 2 frozen cocktails in hand, and froze mid-step when he saw me. The drinks tilted, blue liquid splashing over his hands. I gave a little wave, as casual as if we were running into each other at a grocery store. His face went pale so quickly, I thought he might faint. He stood paralyzed, unable to move toward me or back to Vanessa, who was still scrolling through her phone obliviously. I adjusted my new swimsuit, a daring red piece I never would have chosen before, and walked directly toward him. "What a coincidence," I said, loud enough for nearby sunbathers to hear. "How lucky to run into you here. The weather looks different than I remembered from Seattle." He opened and closed his mouth, speechless. Over his shoulder, I saw Vanessa look up, confusion crossing her face, then horror as she spotted Bradley approaching behind me. "What? How?" My husband finally managed. "Your lover should be more careful about sharing your itinerary on the family cloud account," I said pleasantly. "Oh, and you should meet my friend Bradley. I think he already knows your girlfriend." I turned to Vanessa, whose face had turned the color of sour milk. "That engagement ring looks beautiful in the sunlight. Does your fiancé know you're engaged, or is that just a detail you've overlooked while planning your romantic getaway?" People were watching us now, openly staring at the drama unfolding on the perfect white sand. "This isn't what it looks like," my husband finally said, the most cliched phrase possible. "Really?" I looked pointedly at the 2 blue drinks, then Vanessa's shocked face, then back at him. "Because it looks exactly like you're on a cruise with your lover while telling your wife you're at a business conference in Seattle." Bradley stepped forward, addressing Vanessa directly. "We've booked all the same shore excursions as you. Isn't that a wonderful coincidence? We'll have lots of quality time together on this trip." And that was just the beginning, the first day of 5, the foundation of what would become the most unbearable vacation for 2 people who thought they had gotten away with betrayal. I knew then that I had given this man everything. My youth, my trust, my unconditional support through career changes and family losses. I had been there through it all, believing we were building something meaningful together. And all the while, he had been building a separate life, a life that didn't include me. I gave them one last smile. "Enjoy your drinks. The cruise is just beginning." That night, Bradley and I regrouped in my cabin, analyzing the day's confrontation and fine-tuning our strategy for the days ahead. The initial shock had provided satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. Nowhere near enough for the depth of their betrayal. "They're rattled," Bradley observed, pacing the small confines of my room. I intercepted Vanessa trying to change their dinner reservations and shore excursions. I nodded, scrolling through the ship's app on my tablet. "They won't get far. I've befriended 3 crew members who keep me updated on any changes they try to make." This was no longer a spontaneous reaction. During that week of planning, I had been methodical in ways I never knew I could be. What my husband didn't know, I had photographed all his office documents before leaving home. I had downloaded his text message history through our phone plan's backup service. I had contacted our bank and flagged large expenses from the past year, creating a perfect timeline of his affair through hotel charges and gift purchases. What Vanessa didn't know, Bradley had been equally thorough, gathering screenshots of suspicious messages, tracking her location history, and most damaging of all, documenting how she had been diverting funds from their startup's investors to finance luxury purchases. "Tomorrow is the formal dinner," I said, studying the schedule. "They'll expect us to make a scene." Bradley stopped pacing. "So we don't. We do the opposite." "Exactly." I smiled, feeling a cold clarity. "We'll be charming, friendly even. We'll invite them to join our table. We'll talk casually about psychological warfare." Bradley nodded appreciatively. The anticipation of confrontation is often worse than the confrontation itself. I stood and walked to my suitcase, pulling out a sealed envelope. I've been saving this for the right moment. Now I think I know when to use it. Inside were photos, security camera images from the ship showing my husband and Vanessa on previous cruises, dates, timestamps, proof of a pattern going back 18 months. The head of security had been surprisingly helpful after I explained my situation and offered a generous consulting fee. "How did you get these?" Bradley asked, impressed. Let's just say when your husband brags about always booking the same cruise line for business trips, it creates a traceable pattern. I laid the photos chronologically. 8 cruises in 18 months. Always with her. Always during what he claimed were conferences or client meetings. Bradley whistled softly. That's not a romance. That's a second relationship. Exactly. And tomorrow night, I want them both to understand that we know everything. Not just this cruise. Everything. We stayed up past midnight, planning every interaction, every casual encounter for the remaining days. We were no longer improvising. This was choreographed retribution. The next morning brought another shore excursion, a tour of ancient ruins at our first port of call. As planned, Bradley and I arrived just as my husband and Vanessa were boarding the tour bus. The color drained from their faces when they saw us. I smiled brightly and took the seat directly behind them. Good morning. Sleep well? Vanessa stared straight ahead, rigid with tension. My husband attempted a weak smile. Look, we can talk privately. Oh, we'll have plenty of time to talk, I assured him. We have 3 more days together on this lovely ship. No rush. During the tour, Bradley and I maintained pleasant conversation, occasionally directing innocent questions to our uncomfortable companions. Have you visited these ruins before? Isn't the architecture fascinating? Each normal interaction seemed to make them more nervous than a direct confrontation would have. When we returned to the ship, they were visibly unraveling, exchanging tense whispers, looking over their shoulders, jumping at every corner where they spotted us. For that night's formal dinner, I wore a black dress I had bought specifically for this cruise, elegant, understated, with just enough edge to make a statement. Bradley wore a tailored suit that highlighted all the advantages of his athletic build. We entered the dining room deliberately 15 minutes after my husband and Vanessa had been seated. May we join you? I asked, already pulling out a chair at their table for 2. The maitre d' mentioned you had room? He couldn't refuse without creating a scene. Trapped by social convention, they shifted uncomfortably as we settled in. Wonderful evening, isn't it? Bradley began, unfolding his napkin with practiced ease. Vanessa, that dress looks familiar. Didn't you wear it to the Henderson Charity Gala last month? Her eyes widened slightly. The Henderson Gala had been a work event, one where she had introduced my husband as her colleague. Yes, I think so, she stammered. I flagged down a waiter. Champagne for the table, please. We're celebrating. My husband's expression darkened. What exactly are we celebrating? I smiled, reaching into my purse to pull out the envelope of photos. Anniversaries. Specifically, the 18-month anniversary of your first cruise together. I placed the photos on the table, one by one, like dealing cards. Caribbean, March last year. Mediterranean, May. Alaska, July. Each one during what you told me were business trips. The blood drained from his face. How did you? I've always admired your consistency, I continued, my voice steady despite my hammering heart. Same cruise line. Often the same cabin category. Made tracking surprisingly easy. Vanessa's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. Bradley chose that moment to make his contribution. Speaking of consistency, he said, sliding a folder across the table toward Vanessa. I've been reviewing our company's finances. Interesting pattern of withdrawals that coincides with the dates of these cruises. Her glass froze halfway to her lips. That's not, you can't prove. Our investors were quite interested in the documentation, Bradley continued calmly. I had a fascinating call with them yesterday. This was the moment I had prepared for. Watching the dawn of understanding that we weren't just angry spouses lashing out. We had been methodical, patient. We had receipts, literally and figuratively. What do you want? My husband finally asked, his voice barely audible above the dining room's ambient noise. I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. For tonight? Just dinner? Pleasant conversation? Maybe you could tell Bradley about your conference schedule for the next few months. I'm sure he'd be interested to know which business trips are actually romantic getaways. They sat frozen, trapped by their own web of lies, as the waiter arrived with champagne. I raised my glass. To truth. It always surfaces eventually. During dinner, we maintained cordial conversation, periodically dropping details that confirmed how thoroughly we had investigated their affair. Each revelation fell like a precise incision, small cuts that accumulated into significant damage. By dessert, they both looked physically ill. When we finally stood to leave, I left a room keycard on the table. For your convenience, I explained. It's for the cabin adjacent to yours. We've been taking turns listening through the wall. The soundproofing is surprisingly poor. My husband's face contorted with the understanding that even their most intimate moments had been compromised. As Bradley and I walked away, he whispered. That was masterful. But that's just the beginning, isn't it? I nodded, feeling not joy, but cold satisfaction. Tomorrow we move to phase 2. Tonight was about showing them we know everything. Tomorrow is about showing them what that knowledge will cost them. Back in my cabin, I finally allowed myself a moment of genuine grief, not for my husband, but for the life I had believed in. 15 years lost, trust shattered, future plans evaporated. But in its place was something unexpected, a sense of my own power. I had been blindsided by betrayal, but I had responded not with helpless heartbreak, but with calculated action. I sent one final text to Bradley before sleep. Thank you for today. Tomorrow we show no mercy. His response came immediately. They created this situation. We're just ensuring they experience the consequences they deserve. I fell asleep to the sound of a muffled argument through the wall, a lullaby of justice beginning to unfold. The third day of the cruise dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for what Bradley and I had planned. While my husband and Vanessa had spent the night arguing, we had been finalizing details with various crew members and other passengers we had recruited to our cause. Our first encounter was at breakfast. We saw them at a corner table, hunched over coffee, looking exhausted and tense. Instead of approaching, we sat prominently in the center of the dining room, laughing and chatting with a group of passengers we had befriended. Specifically, 2 couples who turned out to be from my husband's industry. Rachel and Diana are from Westbrook Partners, I exclaimed as we passed their table later, gesturing to our new friends. Apparently, they've been trying to reach your company about that merger proposal. What a coincidence finding them here. My husband's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. Westbrook Partners was indeed a major potential client his company had been courting for months. Now they were learning about his business conference while he sat next to his lover. We're having drinks with them later, Bradley added cheerfully. You should join us. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your professional commitments. They didn't respond, but the message was clear. Their private affair was becoming increasingly public, with imminent professional consequences. By noon, we had implemented the next phase. During their scheduled couples massage at the ship's spa, they arrived to discover their appointment had been accidentally changed to separate treatments in different rooms. Meanwhile, Bradley and I enjoyed their original time slot, having befriended the spa manager with a generous tip and a convincing story about anniversary celebrations. Small disruptions continued throughout the day, their lunch reservation mysteriously canceled, their shore excursion overbooked, their special requests lost in the system. Nothing dramatic enough to blame on sabotage, just a steady stream of inconveniences that were undermining their romantic getaway. But the real turning point came that evening. The ship's program included a passenger talent show followed by a dance contest. Bradley and I had signed up, and we had also entered my husband and Vanessa's names without their knowledge. Our next contestants, announced the cruise director to the packed lounge, join us celebrating a special occasion. Let's welcome David and Vanessa. A spotlight swung to their table, where they sat frozen in horror as their names were called. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. We've heard they're celebrating a special relationship anniversary, the director continued, reading from the card I had submitted. 18 months of relationship bliss. Although I'm also hearing congratulations are in order for Vanessa's engagement. Wait, that can't be right. Confused murmurs spread through the audience as my husband and Vanessa remained glued to their seats, mortification evident on their faces. Maybe they're feeling shy, Bradley called out from our table. Maybe they'd feel more comfortable if we showed everyone photos of their celebration first. Before they could react, the large screen behind the stage lit up with images, the security camera photos from their previous cruises interspersed with screenshots of text messages between them planning their rendezvous. I had carefully edited out anything explicitly incriminating, leaving enough context for the audience to piece together the situation. We didn't authorize, my husband stammered, finally finding his voice as he stood. Oh, one more special photo, I announced, nodding to the AV technician I had befriended. The screen changed to show Vanessa's engagement announcement post, complete with her radiant smile next to Bradley, a massive ring prominently displayed. The date stamp was unmistakable. 6 months into her affair with my husband. The room fell silent as understanding gripped the audience. Then came the whispers, the sideways glances, the judgment. They had avoided this by conducting their affair on anonymous cruises where no one knew them. I think that's our cue, Bradley said, standing and offering me his hand. We should show them how it's done. We took to the dance floor for the competition, performing a tango we had practiced during our planning week. Every dramatic turn and dip was executed with precision. our eyes meeting in a performance of connection that drew enthusiastic applause. When we finished, I saw my husband and Vanessa slip out of the lounge, heads down, unable to face the room full of strangers who now knew their secret. We followed at a distance, watching them argue in a secluded corner of the deck. Their body language told the story: accusations, denials, recriminations. They're imploding, Bradley observed quietly. Good, I replied, feeling a satisfaction deeper than I'd expected. But we're not finished yet. That night, we implemented the final stage of our ship-based plan. While they were in damage control mode after the public humiliation, I arranged for the ship's photography team to deliver something special to their cabin, a commemorative album we had created using the ship's photo service. Inside were professional photos taken throughout the cruise, candid shots of their arguments, their tense body language, their obvious discomfort as Bradley and I appeared in frame after frame. The photographers had been generously compensated to capture these moments discreetly. The album's title, engraved in elegant script, When Truth Surfaced, A Journey of Discovery. We watched from the hallway as a steward delivered the package through the crack of their door. I glimpsed my husband's face when he opened it, the dawn of recognition, the descent into defeat. But the real culmination came the next morning, as the ship prepared to dock at our final port of call. Bradley and I had arranged for a special announcement over the ship's PA system. Attention passengers, David and Vanessa could please report to the purser's office regarding an urgent matter with their disembarkation documents. When they arrived, visibly anxious, they found not just the purser, but also a representative from the cruise line's corporate office, who happened to be aboard. Another fortunate connection we had made. Mr. David, Ms. Vanessa, the representative began formally. It has come to our attention that you may have used fraudulent information when booking this cruise. My husband frowned. What are you talking about? Your booking indicates this trip was reserved through your company as a business expense, with tax documentation filed accordingly. However, the nature of your stay appears to be personal rather than professional. Vanessa paled. That's not... We didn't. Furthermore, the representative continued, there's the matter of using company credit cards for non-business expenses, which has been flagged by your company's compliance department. Bradley and I watched from a discreet distance as my husband's professional world began collapsing in real time. The evidence we had gathered, including email exchanges I had forwarded to his company's ethics hotline, had triggered an internal investigation. Meanwhile, Vanessa received her own devastating news. Her access to their startup's financial accounts had been frozen pending an audit directed by investors. Bradley had moved quickly, and her financial manipulations were now under scrutiny. As they stood there, their carefully constructed parallel lives disintegrating around them, I felt a strange elation. Not happiness, not exactly vindication, but a deep sense of justice. This isn't just about the betrayal, I said quietly to Bradley as we watched from afar. It's about the calculation, the premeditation, the years of lies. He nodded. They thought they were too smart to get caught, too arrogant to face consequences. Do you regret anything? I asked, suddenly curious about his feelings now that our plan was nearing its end. Bradley considered this for a moment. I regret trusting someone who didn't deserve it. I regret not seeing the signs earlier. But this, he gestured toward the scene unfolding, this I don't regret at all. When my husband and Vanessa emerged from the purser's office, their faces ashen with the understanding that their actions had real-world consequences beyond their romantic entanglement, I stepped into their path. Enjoy the cruise? I asked, my voice steady and clear. My husband looked at me with new eyes. Not anger or defiance, but something like fear. Fear of what else I might know, what else I might have done. This is just the beginning, I told him quietly. When we dock tomorrow, you'll find your belongings packed and waiting at a hotel. The locks have been changed. Divorce papers are with my lawyer, and every member of our family and social circle has received a detailed account of how and why our marriage ended. I turned to Vanessa. As for you, I wonder if your wedding vendors will refund your deposits. Bradley tells me he's been quite thorough in his communications with them. She flinched as if I had slapped her. The thing about betrayal, I continued, addressing both of them, is that it shows who people really are. You both showed me exactly who you are. I'm just making sure everyone else sees it too. With that, Bradley and I walked away, leaving them standing in shock in our wake. That night, our final night on the ship, we dined at the captain's table. The reservation originally made for my husband and Vanessa, now transferred to us through the connections we had cultivated. To new beginnings, Bradley proposed, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his, feeling lighter than I had in years. And to truth, no matter how painful, always setting you free. 6 months after that fateful cruise, I stood on a different deck, this one belonging to my new waterfront condo. The ocean stretched before me, infinite and uncertain, like my future. But for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty felt exhilarating, rather than terrifying. The divorce had been finalized with surprising speed. My husband, faced with the mountain of evidence I had gathered and the professional embarrassment already unfolding, hadn't contested any of my terms. His affair had cost him more than just his marriage. The ethics investigation at his company had resulted in a demotion and professional censure. The cruise line had also banned him from future bookings after determining he had indeed committed fraud with his business expense claims. As for Vanessa, her story had unraveled even more dramatically. The financial irregularities Bradley had uncovered were just the tip of the iceberg. Once investors began looking closely at their startup's books, they found a pattern of embezzlement that led to criminal charges. Her wedding, needless to say, never materialized, though the canceled vendor contracts and non-refundable deposits had created a financial burden that compounded her legal troubles. I sipped my morning coffee, watching seagulls wheel against the clear blue sky. My phone chimed with a text from Bradley. Just landed. Still on for lunch? Our relationship had evolved in unexpected ways since the cruise. Not romantically. We were both too scarred for that leap, but into something equally valuable. A genuine friendship forged in the crucible of shared betrayal and recovery. We had stayed in contact through the aftermath, supporting each other through divorce proceedings, legal complications, and the emotional turbulence of rebuilding our lives. He had relocated to open a new office of his now thriving company in my coastal city, a business decision that had coincided with my own relocation after the divorce. "See you at the Pier restaurant at 1, I texted back as I prepared for our lunch. I reflected on how differently things had turned out from what either of us had expected when we boarded that cruise 6 months earlier, consumed with anger and betrayal. Neither of us had imagined emerging stronger, or finding a genuine connection with each other. The Pier restaurant was busy when I arrived, but Bradley had secured our usual table on the patio. He stood when he saw me, his smile genuine. "The Tokyo deal closed," he announced as I sat down. "The investors are thrilled. Congratulations." I raised my water glass in a mock toast. Not bad for someone whose fiancé tried to sink his company. He laughed, a sound that had become more frequent as the months passed. "Speaking of sinking, did you hear anything about our favorite couple?" I shook my head. Not directly, but Caroline mentioned seeing David at a conference last month. Apparently he's lost weight and looks haunted. Caroline, my former neighbor, had stayed firmly in my corner during the divorce. "Vanessa's plea agreement was finalized," Bradley replied. "Probation, restitution, and community service. Her parents had to mortgage their house for her legal fees. We exchanged these updates not with malice, but with the detached interest of people who had moved beyond the need for revenge. Satisfaction had faded into something more valuable: indifference. Our meal arrived and conversation shifted to our current lives. My new consulting business, his expansion plans, the charity gala we would both attend next weekend. "I've been meaning to ask," Bradley said as we finished dessert. "That cruise line sent me a promotional email yesterday. Caribbean itinerary, special offer for holiday travel." I raised an eyebrow. "Planning another revenge cruise so soon?" "Actually," he said, his expression turning serious, "I was thinking about reclaiming the experience. A trip with no agenda or manipulation, just enjoyment." "Sounds good," I replied, surprised by his suggestion. "Would you consider coming? As friends?" he added quickly. "I think we both deserve to experience a cruise that isn't organized around someone else's betrayal." I considered his offer, this unexpected invitation to revisit the scene of our strange alliance. 6 months ago, I would have recoiled at the idea. Now I found myself nodding. "I'd like that," I said simply. As we walked along the waterfront after lunch, I realized something profound had shifted. The cruise that was meant to expose betrayal had inadvertently revealed something entirely different: my own resilience. I had survived not just my husband's infidelity, but the collapse of a future I had believed in completely. "You know what?" I said as we paused to watch sailboats in the harbor. "Sometimes I almost want to thank them." Bradley looked surprised. "Thank them for what?" "For forcing me to become someone stronger than I ever knew I could be. For inadvertently introducing me to a true friend." I gestured between us. "Their betrayal was painful, but what came after? I wouldn't change it for anything." He nodded slowly. "I've had the same thought. If Vanessa hadn't cheated, I'd be married to someone who was willing to steal from our company and lie to my face daily. Instead, I'm here, rebuilding something authentic. The sun gleamed on the water, casting everything in golden light. In that moment, I realized the most unexpected outcome of all. True closure doesn't come from revenge, however satisfying it might be. It comes from building something new from the wreckage, something honest and real. So, Bradley said, checking his watch, I should head back for my conference call. But about that cruise, winter vacation, New Year's itinerary, I smiled, feeling a lightness that had once seemed impossible. New Year sounds perfect, an appropriate way to start the next chapter. As we said goodbye, I took one last look at the ocean, the same ocean we had sailed during that fateful cruise. The water that had carried us through betrayal now stretched before me as a symbol of possibility. The horizon was open, the future unwritten, and for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to see what came next.